Hi, my name is Joey Legrand, and today we're going to talk about SageRx, which is a tool that I built along with a few people in an organization I started called CodeRx, meant to help people work with drug data more easily because I had a lot of trouble myself. So I kind of thought there might be some better ways to do it. What is SageRx? It is essentially a data pipeline, if you've ever heard that term, for open drug data or a series of data pipelines. And it's curated by pharmacists. So built by pharmacists, and we're still maintaining it and working on it today. So it starts with the raw data extracted from open drug data sources, so like NLM, FDA, CMS, that's automatically loaded into a single database. So all those different sources coming into one database. And then once it's in there, it's further transformed and combined into useful tables. So the E from extract, the L from load, and the T from transform is what you may have heard of as ELT or maybe ETL, just a common way of getting data from kind of one place to another. Simply, that is what we're trying to do, just specifically for open drug data. We don't spend much time on this, but this is the SageRx itself is made up of several other open source tools. The first one is Apache Airflow. This is a kind of task scheduler, so it is where we have all the drug sources laid out here in kind of a dashboard. And inside this tool, we've programmed how frequently they're updated by the government organizations that are responsible for maintaining them, what format the data is in. Some things are in CSV files, some things are in like RTF files, others are in tab delimited, others are Excel. You kind of get the idea. And then how you get to them. Sometimes they're in multiple layers of zip files, and all of this is automated and programmed into Airflow to be able to automatically get the new files every time they're updated. When it's time to update it, you can execute a series of complex tasks to get that. This is for RxNorm. So it kind of does a few steps in a row. So getting authentication credentials with UMLS license, then downloading the file, and then unzipping it, and then loading each individual file into a table in the database, and then transforming it, which we're going to talk about next. DBT is short for Data Build Tool, which is a really useful tool for data transformation that's open source. So it takes the raw data that we just loaded into the database, and it takes two steps with that data, which we'll talk about next, which goes from raw to staging to intermediate schemas. And ultimately, all this data ends up in a database. We chose PostgreSQL, or Postgres for short, as a database for this tool because it's open source and well-maintained has lots of cool features. But eventually, we'll probably make this available for other types of databases as well. pgadmin is a user interface that you're seeing here where you can interact with the data in the database. And this is where you'd be writing queries and things like that. In pgadmin, there's a section called schemas, which is what we kind of been talking about a little bit. This is where you'll see data source, you'll see staging, and you'll see intermediate. Talk about each of these individually. Data source is the raw data. So if you remember from a previous lesson, this is what a few RxNorm tables would look like in the data source schema. It would just be all those like shorthand letters and weird table names, but it's useful for certain types of queries. Then staging is the initial transformation. These are custom queries that I wrote to transform that raw data into more of a conceptual mental model of how I think of medication data. So the tables look kind of like this. It starts out with NDC, a table for NDCs at the top. There's a table for clinical products. There's a table for ingredients, a table for dose forms, dose form groups, ingredient strengths. And if it looks familiar, it's because it's the same structure that we talked about in the last lesson about understanding RxNorm, just in table format. So if you can conceptually understand the layout of RxNorm from our previous lesson, you can start using that mental model to write queries against SageRx. And the last table is last schema is the intermediate schema, which is further transformation. So we take the building blocks of this table and make it easy to go from, say, like an NDC all the way down to an ingredient without having to write more than one select statement. So how do you get to this? There's two options right now. It's hosted on pgadmin.sagerx.io. And then the other option, we open sourced it, so you can download this and run it locally. So in the next class, we are going to give some examples of queries with SageRx.